right. Let's start off by saying Barakatah Bahashem Yahawashi, Bahashem Recha Kudash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is All These Beautiful Prophecies Coming to Pass. And we got to stop for what? We got to stop teaching about the prophecies because these two clowns coming up with some bullshit. You know, that old tired ass, goddamn, fake ass Christian dogma nonsense that has been debunked so many times, that it's insanity at this point. This is why, you are commanded to call the cops if these devils roll up on you. You're just messing around a little bit. But basically, this is why we don't deal with these Christians like Elder Pastor has been saying over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because it's a waste of time. What else can we say to them? Or what else can they say to us to make us change our mind and make them change their mind? The Apostle Paul said, convince the gainsayer. Obviously, they're not going to get it. So why are we going to waste our time going back and forth, dealing with it? Look, we have other better things to do. There's too many beautiful prophecies popping off for us to be going back and forth, with this same rhetorical nonsense that has been spewing, out there, going all the way back to the Renaissance period. The same old two topics, the Gentiles can be saved and is the Most High and His Son the same, the virgin birth, another one. We done gone through it. We already broke it down. If you don't accept it, you don't receive it, move on. What else you gonna do? What else we gonna do? You've heard Elder Pastor speak about the scripture that if the person doesn't receive you, they don't receive your peace. You feel you got the peace. You feel you got the gospel. You're telling us about your gospel. We're not receiving your gospel, so move the fuck on. Because we've wiped the dust with you. And we've wiped the dust off on you. We're not going to keep going back and forth with you. The only reason why we do videos like this is because of the elect's sake and for the newer members that are waking up now. And dealing with the so-called Gentiles can be saved issue with them two clowns, them two demons, them two devils, that have sold out, that are two effeminates. That's what they are, effeminate, both of them. It's permissible, and you could eat it. I'm not, because it's disgusting. Little weasel can't even eat some bitter herbs. But you're gonna be a master teacher in the Bible. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. So pretty much, I was doing some reading last night in the book of 1 Peter. And, just stuff that we already gone over. And, just ran across it again. So Spirit was on me last night to Lord's will today do a lesson on it. So I want to hit a couple of points in there. Just to show you that these are Israelites. And the book that I have, right, I had bought a King James Version Bible from Barnes and Nobles. And there's one person that I guess they were the ones that put the whole thing together. He gives like a little brief summary of the books within it. Just before you read the book, it gives like a little summary of what was going on and a little history, and he goes into the Greek, and what the letters were called, so on and so forth. And pretty much in the summary, he was telling you that the Apostle Peter was talking to Israelites. But the book starts off, when you read here, the book starts off in 1 Peter 1:1. It says, Peter, an apostle of Yahawashi, to the strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. So these strangers are Israelites that were what? Scattered. Now who are the scattered? when you go to the word scattered, right? It goes into the word, I'm sorry, that's strangers. You can hit that too. Scattered, you have the word diaspora, which means a scattering, dispersion of Israelites dispersed among foreign nations. And this is exactly what it is. Why? Because when you understand what happened to us as a nation, we pretty much we were scattered among the nations because we didn't uphold our side of the bargain as far as keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, which we couldn't keep. It's impossible. Going all the way back to Adam, all the way to this very day, we cannot keep the laws 100%. So it's impossible that we're going to be saved by keeping all the laws. Now, do we keep the laws? To the best of our ability. We do the best we can. And the rest, Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh takes care of the rest. Whatever our shortcomings are, the Lord, steps in. We could do all things through Yahweh which strengthens us. Ephesians 4:13. Then it says of Christians, which are the ones that know that they're Israelites, the ones that woke up to the gospel or the truth of Yahweh, scattered abroad among the Gentiles, which is dealing with the Israelite foreigners, because you did have actual Christians that came out of a Gentile state of mind that were still scattered among other Israelites that were still in that Gentile state of mind. And that's pretty much what the book of 1 Peter is about. 2 Peter also, because it's two letters addressed to the same people. All right? And when we get into the 4th chapter of 1 Peter 4:1, it says, "For as much then as Yahweh has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind." And this is why we tell you have to understand what you're involved in. And the Elder Apostle Gabar has been saying this for years. We echo the sentiment that a lot of you do not understand what you're involved in. I was just sent a video earlier, and it's just what can I say? It was a video of an individual officer, Mishael, and his marriage to some woman, in IUIC. Here it is. You got all these beautiful prophecies popping off, and this is the best you could. This is the best you got. Gimmicks. Nothing more than to gather more followers, so you could get more money, so you can have control over more zombies. Nowhere in that video, when you watch it, nowhere in that video is it putting you in the mindset of the hard times, super hard times that are coming, the perilous times that the apostle spoke of. But he told the Bishop Timothy that perilous times shall come, and we're in those times, but they're going to get more and more intense. So nowhere within that video does it show that. It just shows you like it gives you a moist muffin feeling. There's a word for it. There's no urgency. There's no urgency in the hard times that are coming. There's nothing, with these guys that's pushing that the hardships that are coming, to prepare your mind for the hardships that are coming. What did Yahweh Shai say? I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how I am straightened until it be accomplished. We have a baptism to be baptized with, and that's the time of Jacob's trouble, which is going to intensify. And we understand that, and that's why we, constantly speak about these things, constantly bring out legislation or different articles or different situations that are leading us deeper into Jacob's trouble. Like this war with Iran over there, the shortages that are happening, the intentional destruction of the natural resources and energy structures, that are responsible for providing the world with all of its natural resources and all of its energy sources, the majority of their energy sources. And that's going to lead to more and more hardships. And that's what we're supposed to be arming our minds with. Just like Yahushua had that in the back of his mind the whole time he was preaching. From the age of 30 to 33. That was like a splinter in his mind. And the closer it got, the more intense the feeling got. And this is the mindset that we're supposed to be in. Tonight is the Passover. We're not supposed to be in this festive, melodious, We're supposed to be in a serious mindset that anything can pop off after this, after this Passover. Remember what happened in 2020? Once we kept our Passover, everything else was shut down. The other camps couldn't keep the Passover. So hard times are coming. Hard times are here, but they're going to get more intense. And these are the things we're supposed to be focusing on. That's why it says, "And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times and strength of salvation." It says, "For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin." And this is pretty much the trial of our faith. That's why the Lord said, "Despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, for whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth and rebuketh often." Why? Because that constant chastening is pretty much shaping, molding us. Stripping away all of those impurities. Getting us mentally prepared for what's coming. Because the world is going to be judged. Because the world is not going through any real suffering. They're catching hell on certain things, but they're not really going through suffering for the truth's sake. 1 Corinthians 11:32, but when we are judged, we are chastened of the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, that we should not be condemned with the world. Why? Because the whole world lieth in wickedness, and the whole world is condemned. And I was thinking to myself yesterday, and I was just walking and just observing people, that this is a fucked up world. And the more fucked up thing about it is that this younger generation that's growing up, they view this as just being normal. And so just imagine how they're going to bring up their children to view this as being normal. This is not fucking normal. The way that Jake is behaving out here, that is not normal. And it's sickening. It's embarrassing and it's sickening. So the world is condemned. The whole world lieth in wickedness. So going back to 1 Peter 4 and 2, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of the Most High. Because the Lord, the Apostle Peter, through the Spirit of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, speaking to these Israelites, and telling them, that they, to leave those lusts behind. Because those lusts is what got Jake in the hot water that they were in. Because that led to the falling away from the Lord. That led to, idol worship. That led to us becoming a degenerate plant of a strange vine unto the Lord. It says, "For the time past of our life may suffice us to have brought the will of the Gentiles." In other words, when we were in that, dealing with the Israelite foreigners, when you were in that situation, all of that shit that you did, like for instance, we could use ourselves for that. The shit that we did in the world, that's in the past. It should be sufficient. We shouldn't have any desire to have to go back to any of that crap. Because as you can see, it's decadent. It doesn't last. You see these people out here that do not take care of themselves, that are partying every goddamn night, drinking every goddamn night, using heavy drugs and doing all kind of shit. You see how they look. They look haggard. And those are demons that keep them going. And this is what was happening now. Look. This ain't nothing new. This is something that's been going on for ages. Every empire had their different gods that they would worship. Every empire had, parties, like today you have these so-called discos, and they don't call them discos anymore, but they have like these clubs and all this stuff that people go to. That's nothing new. That's something that goes all the way back in the time. So the past of our life should suffice us to have wrought those things. It says, when we walk in lasciviousness, lusts, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. And this is what got Jake in that hot water. Now, before I go into some of those words, let's go to the next chapter over, 1 Corinthians 12 and 2. You know that you were Gentiles, past tense. Where? In your minds, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as you were led. So you were, in your mind, Gentiles, right? You know that you were Gentiles, past tense, carried away into these dumb idols. This is how it happened. Even as you were led. Why? Because this is what you were taught. Just like this younger generation is teaching their children this bugged out madness of this culture that is not even a culture. It's a degradation of the moral fiber of Jake out here. But it's passed on like if it's some kind of philosophical, innovative, scientific, brain surgeon, rocket scientist shit. And if you don't act a certain way, they look at you like a square. Let's see what it says in the NLT. You know that when you were still pagans, see, you were led astray and swept along in worshiping speechless idols, because this was something that was passed on from generation to generation. So just look at the generations from the 70s to now, and how each generation things became more and more degraded, passed on from generation to generation. Well, that's what was going on back then with the Israelite foreigners worshiping these stupid, dumb idols. So when we look up this word revelings in 1 Peter 4 and 3, you have two words there. You have revelings and you have banqueting. Revelings is the word komos, which is also used in Romans, the 13th chapter. It says a revel, carousal, a nocturnal and riotous procession of half-drunken and frolicsome fellows who after supper parade through the streets with torches and music in honor of Bacchus or some other deity, and sing and play before houses of male and female friends, hence used generally of feasts and drinking parties that are protracted till late at night, and indulge in revelry. You see? So this is the same shit, and this is what all of that led to. Worshipping of the idols led to all of this degradation, all of this immoral behavior, all of this promiscuity, Moism, so on and so forth. All right? So what I did was I asked the chat a question, right? Because you had revelings, and you also had banqueting. Now banqueting, it's a banquet. You have a banquet. It's a gathering, potos, a drinking, carousing. But banqueting, when you get together, it may be something formal, but after a while, after eating and drinking a certain amount of liquor, it's going to start getting debaucherous. It's going to start getting riotous. it's going to start getting crazy. All right, so go on here, because what I do is I go to the chat, and sometimes, you know, sometimes what happens with the chat is sometimes something might refresh and you'll lose everything. So what I do is, you know, I'll copy the question and I'll go to, you know, these Google Docs, and I make my own documentation. So that way I can have all the questions and everything and the answers already there in case anything happens to the chat, like if it refreshes or whatever. So it says, this is what I asked: did the Feast of Bacchus have drinking parties until the early morning? Yes, festivals dedicated to Bacchus, the Roman equivalent of Dionysus. Yeah, because this Bacchus is Latin, Dionysus is Greek, were well known for exactly that kind of behavior. The most famous of these celebrations were the Bacchanalia, and they still they still have Bacchanal out, I believe, in the islands, down in South America. Let's see something. Bacchanal. Not sure how to really spell it. Okay, Bacchanal. Okay, well, I was close. A Bacchanal is a wild, drunken, and often ecstatic celebration. Originating from ancient Roman festival, Bacchanalia held in honor of Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry. Key characteristics include chaotic merriment, indulgence in wine, and passionate music, often acting as a form of joyful liberation in modern contexts like carnival. You have Carnival, I think it is another one. Is Bacchanal celebrated in South America and the Caribbeans? Yes, Bacchanal, often referring to wild, unrestrained revelry of carnival, is a core part of cultural celebrations in the Caribbean, and it is closely related to the massive carnival tradition, Carnival, in South America. While Bacchanal can mean a wild party in the Caribbean, it is synonymous with carnival, representing a time of soca music, dancing, vibrant costumes, and letting go of societal inhibitions. It's all freakism, and Jake is still keeping it to this day. So these same Jakes that you see keeping these wild processions today, like you see here, these are the same individuals that was keeping it back then. These are the same Israelite foreigners that were back there doing the same exact shit. And this is in Jamaica. You know? Scantily clad women. Yeah, that was the same picture. Look at this mother. You get the idea. Okay, so it says, yes, festivals dedicated to Bacchus, a Roman equivalent of Dionysus, were well known for exactly that kind of behavior. The most famous of these celebrations were the Bacchanalia, the type of Bacchanalia. These gatherings often included heavy drinking of wine, dancing, music, and ecstatic rituals, feasting that could last late into the night, as we read for the definition of the word revelings, or even until dawn, a sense of loosened social rules and inhibition. Originally, the Bacchanalia may have been more restrained and religious, but over time, especially in the 2nd century BCE, which is where you had the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid dynasties, they gained a reputation among Roman authorities for wild, all-night revelry and excess. This alarm led to a major crackdown by the Roman Senate in 186 BCE during the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, which tried to limit these gatherings, to no avail, of course. So yes, while not every celebration was necessarily a non-stop party, many Bacchic festivals did involve extended, late night, and sometimes early morning drinking and revelry. So what I asked next was banqueting and rioting considered the same as revelry? They're related ideas, but not exactly the same, and the differences matter. Revelry is the broad umbrella term. It refers to lively celebration, feasting, drinking, music, dancing, and general merrymaking. It doesn't automatically imply anything negative, just exuberant festivity like what you'd expect at celebrations for Bacchus or during the Bacchanalia. Banqueting is more specific. It means a formal or semi-formal feast, structured eating and drinking, often part of a celebration or ceremony. Banqueting can lead into revelry, but on its own it's more orderly. Rioting, on the other hand, is quite different. It implies disorder, chaos, or even violence. Yeah, you see that when people drink to a certain degree, they lose their motor skills, they start acting a fool, because in these liquors you have spirits. Now, some people are happy drunks, some people are sad drunks, some people are bad drunks. Some people turn into Mike Tyson, when they drink, So it's just a whole plethora of different emotions, that come over people when they drink these spirits. Loss of control, often in a public setting, a negative or dangerous connotation. Yeah, and that's what the Apostle Paul was speaking about in the book of Romans 13. And 13, let us walk honestly as in the day, not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying. So you have the word rioting, which is the same word that we just read for reveling, komos. The nocturnal and riotous procession of half-drunken and frolicsome fellows. Partying through the streets, parading through the streets. And you see that people go club hopping. They have they go to certain areas where they have a whole bunch of different clubs, and they'll go from one club to the other, getting drunk, acting a fool. That all goes back to ancient Greece and Rome. And that's what Jake was doing. So, it says how they relate. Revelry, joyful, often noisy celebration, neutral or positive. Banqueting, organized feasting can be part of revelry. Rioting, chaotic disorder can result from excessive revelry, but isn't the same thing. In historical description, especially by Roman writers, wild festivals like the Bacchanalia were sometimes portrayed as sliding from revelry, excess, riotous behavior, even if that was partly exaggerated for moral or political reasons. So banqueting plus rioting, revelry, but revelry can include banqueting and at its extreme be described as riotous. So I put in, what is Bacchanalia? Bacchanalia were secretive, ecstatic festivals in ancient Rome held in honor of Bacchus, the Roman version of Dionysus. What were they? Bacchanalia started as religious rites but became famous for their intense, emotional, and often wild celebrations. They typically involved heavy wine drinking, feasting and banqueting, music, dancing, and chanting, ecstatic or trance-like states. And you see sometimes these people be so under like the influence of alcohol or drugs that they are like in a trance, because them demons got them. Nighttime gatherings, sometimes lasting until dawn. Unlike many formal Roman religious ceremonies, these festivals were more free-form and emotionally charged, emphasizing personal experience and release. Yeah, because that's why it turned into freakism. That's why you had the term komos, which was also to lie down. Because when you go back to Romans 13, the word there, chambering, a chamber is a place where you go lay down. Koite, a place for lying down. See, resting, sleeping. A bed, couch, the marriage bed of adultery, cohabitation with a lawful or unlawful sexual intercourse. So all this stuff was going on in honor of these different demonic gods. In the case of the Greeks and the Romans, Dionysus and Bacchus. It says why they became controversial. By the 2nd century BC, Roman authorities grew suspicious of Bacchanalia because they were held in secret, included large mixed groups, men and women, different classes. Because this was a chance for everyone to pretty much mingle, whether you were a commoner or you were a high society, so to speak. Seemed to encourage loss of control and moral looseness. This led to a major crackdown in 186 BCE through the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalia, which severely restricted or banned many of these gatherings, but they still gathered. Simple way to think of it: Bacchanalia, religious festival plus drinking party plus ecstatic celebration, sometimes viewed by outsiders as going too far. Today, the word Bacchanalia is still used more generally to describe wild partying or unrestrained revelry. And that's what's going on still to this day. And this is what was happening back then with Jake. And that's why the Apostle Peter said that. He said that, let me read this part again. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. So when we go to 2 Maccabees, chapter 6 and verse 1, it says, not long after this, the king, which is Antiochus Epiphanes IV, sent an old man of Athens to compel the Jews, the Israelites, to depart from the laws of their fathers and not to live after the laws of the Most High. So what we're reading about here are the origins of how the Israelites became Gentiles. You had certain ones that held to the faith, held to the customs, held to the laws. Some of them suffered, death. And then you had some of them that sold out to live a better life. No different than today. You got sellouts today. And to pollute also the temple in Jerusalem, and to call it the temple of Jupiter Olympius, and that in Gerizim, of Jupiter the defender of strangers, as they did desire that dwelt in the place. And you had a lot of wicked Israelites that were down with this. So now you understand why the Lord was so upset with Israel and cast Israel out the land and made them to go into captivity among the nations. They were scattered. So when these letters were written and when the Apostle Paul was going out teaching, pretty much the Apostle Paul was addressing these Israelites that had fallen away before. Going to Romans 11, because I was supposed to start with this, but the Spirit had me start in a different area. Romans 11:13. For I speak to you Gentiles or Israelite foreigners, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, Israelite foreigners, I magnify mine office. See? And this is who he was speaking to. And then the Apostle Peter speaking to the same people. So going back to 2 Maccabees, I got Ezra's on the brain. 2 Maccabees 6 and 3, the coming in of this mischief was sore and grievous to the people, because you had some that did not want to follow that, and they suffered persecution. But others didn't care. Others were just straight up wicked. For the temple was filled with riot, as we read about rioting, and reveling, as we read the Apostle Peter mention the word revelings and banquetings. Who is this? Who's this? The Israelites. For the temple was filled with riot. Yeah, there was drinking, there was sex going on, and you've heard of the orgies that happened in the Roman Empire, Greek Empire, even in the modern Roman and Greek Empire, America. Studio 54, and you had orgies. You've heard, Richard Pryor on his stand-ups say you go to these parties, you don't know who you effed and who effed you. Sniffing coke, doing all type of drugs, drinking. And this is what happens in these places. But this is what was done in honor of these gods. And this is what got Jake in that hot water. For the temple was filled with riot and reveling by the Gentiles, these heathens, who dallied with harlots. See? So they brought in prostitutes. This is where you have something known as the temple harlots, both men and women. Sometimes it was man on woman, sometimes it was man on man, woman on woman. depending on what the sacrifice was. And this is why the elder apostle Gabar always goes into those wicked demonic high holy days of Esau, these witches, and they have different, events that they celebrate around the time when we celebrate our new moon. But they do it on the left side. And they have a lot of different sexual, rituals that happen. And depending on what the high demonic day is, it's either man on man, man on woman, woman on woman, or woman or man on beast. It's no different today. And it had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places. And besides that, and this is pretty much what was going on during the time of the Midianites. In Baal Peor. The men, were having sex with the women, and the Lord didn't get mad at Jake because the men were having sex with the women of the other nations. He got mad and he sent that plague because, they were having sex in the honor of Baal Peor. And that's when Phinehas took that javelin and ran the man through the back. I'm not sure what tribe he was, I forget the tribe. And the woman who was a heathen through the stomach would show you that he was popping her in honor of their God. That appeased the anger of the Lord. And it turned his anger away. And beside that, brought in these things that were not lawful, right? Like eating pork and shit like that. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. So anything that was unlawful, the heathens did. And Jake followed, certain Jakes. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath days or ancient feasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. So you couldn't even call yourself an Israelite back then. So if the king here is Antiochus Epiphanes IV, who is a so-called Greek, did not allow you to call yourself a Jew, an Israelite, what did you have to call yourself? American? Australian? No, those names didn't exist back then. You had to call yourself a Greek. And this is why the Apostle Paul said there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, because there was a great disdain by the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites, that spoke the Hebrew language, that kept the laws, against these Israelites that were steeped in that Hellenistic culture. They had a great anger towards them, a great disdain. But they didn't understand that the Lord was gathering the elect from among them, because there was an election among them. That's why the Apostle Paul said there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek. There's only that one speaks Hebrew, the other one speaks Greek. That's it. They're both Israelites. And in the day of the king's birth, every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices, which was pork. And when the fast, I really should say the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. And when you see these different Jakes doing this is a procession to Bacchus. This look at this. This is all in procession to Bacchus. All this crap you see here. These demons. This is what they were doing back then. Back then, certain ones of them were forced to do this. Today, they're just doing it, because they love it. They love it. Look at this. So these are the processions to Bacchus. So you get the idea. Bacchanalia, see? And it's spelled the same way. Jamaica 2014. So, goes on to say, verse 8, 2 Maccabees 6 and 8. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy. And I believe, I can't remember which Ptolemy this was. I think it was Euergetes. No. Philopator the fourth, or was it the sixth? Let's see. Which Ptolemy was contemporary with Antiochus Epiphanes. The sixth, okay, it was the sixth, Philometer. So he was contemporary with him. So this individual here was Ptolemy the sixth. So by his suggestion, all of the neighboring cities had to follow that custom against the Israelites, against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. So it wasn't just Antiochus Epiphanes, but he was the main demon, or the main driving demon force behind it. Verse 9, and whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles, Israelite foreigners, to the manners of the actual Gentiles, should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. Spare me 1 second. So now when you understand that history and much more of what was going on back then, and then you get into the reading of the New Testament, now you start to understand why you had the situation with the Gentiles. The salvation of the Gentiles, and why it said, you were called, you were Gentiles. Or scriptures like this in Ephesians chapter 2, which these devils, these apologists try to use this and say that this is this proof that the Gentiles got brought in. No. Ephesians 2:11. Wherefore remember that you being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, meaning you Israelites, you were Gentiles in the flesh before, because this is how you were born from birth, because you received it from your parents, they received it from their parents, they received it from their parents, going all the way back to Antiochus Epiphanes and the Greeks back then. So when you were born as a heathen, even though you're an Israelite. Because some of those Israelites lost that, period. Some of them, that were speaking Greek, which were distinguished by the word Grecian or Hellenization, they knew that they were Israelites, but because of the area they lived, they spoke the Greek language. But some of them just spoke Greek and they had no clue or idea that they were Israelites. Just that simple. So here Ephesians 2:11 says, wherefore remember that you being in time past in the Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, or those are the uncircumcised. And some of them actually some of them going back to when Antiochus Epiphanes, did this, they actually sewed the foreskin of their penis, the foreskin back on their penis. And that was called epispasm. That was the term, the so-called legal term or whatever you want to call it. So this is what they were being called, uncircumcision. But the ones after that, since it was unlawful to get circumcised, they remained uncircumcised. So that's what they call it, uncircumcision. By that, which are the Israelite foreigners, and you were called that by that which is called the circumcision, or the Jews, in the flesh, made by hands. See? So you were called heathens by the Israelites that were in Israel, that kept the law, statutes, and commandments. And you that fell away, that worshiped those demons, those gods, the fake gods, you were called uncircumcision, or Gentiles. All right? So, going back to 1 Peter 4:3 again, for the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatry. So now you understand this. And many other scriptures like this, like Romans 13, so on and so forth. It says, wherein they think it strange that you run not with them to the same excess of riots, speaking evil of you. Now who is this? This is other Israelite foreigners that you used to roll with. Just like today, you have, friends in the world that you would go out there and do all kind of crazy shit with. Then you came into the truth, the Lord brought you into the truth, and your whole life changed. And they're trying to hit you up to go to the club or to do this, that, and the other, and you're like, nah. And they're looking at you like you a square. What the hell happened to this guy? So that's the same thing that was going on back then. So 1 Peter 4:4, right, in the NLT, of course, your former friends are surprised when you no longer plunge into the flood of wild and destructive things they do. So they slander you, see? So these are other Israelite foreigners that were cool with you, right? Now, when we go to that word riot here, you're not going back to that same excess of riot. The word there is asotia, which is an abandoned, dissolute life. Now, a dissolute life is a life that is not, that there's no structure to it. Like, in other words, you're down for anything. You don't really have any moral standards anymore. A dissolute life is one characterized by a lack of moral restraint, see? Marked by excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures, vice, and immoral or corrupt behavior. So they're surprised that you don't go back to that with them when that's what you used to do with them. Profligacy, prodigality. You have the prodigal son. The prodigal son is the story pretty much of the Israelite foreigners returning back, coming back to the fold. And that's why the son that was always with his father, which would represent the Israelites in Israel, they were mad. You ain't never thrown no party for me. Here it is, this guy done wasted all your living, on riotous living. I believe the word riotous living was in there. Let's see, what is that? Luke 15. Riotous. Nope. Riotous. Luke 15, says, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And it should be one of those that we just read, riotous living. This one is asotos. Asotos, dissolute, profligate, I can't say this word, profligately. That's a tongue twister. Profligately is an adverb describing actions done in a wasteful, reckless, extravagant, or shamelessly immoral manner. And that's what the Israelite foreigners were doing. Riotously. And we read about a dissolute life, meaning you're down for whatever. There's no boundaries to you. If it's moral or immoral, you don't care, you're going to do it. And then the son, the other son that was with him, he was livid. See, verse 28, and he was angry, the son that stayed with the father, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out and entreated him. And he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment, and yet thou never gavest me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this nigga over here, this thy son was come, which has devoured thy living with harlots. That goes into what? That goes into, the revelry. That goes into the, worshiping of idols. Thou hast killed for him the fatted calf. You ain't just killed any calf. You killed the fatted calf. And he said unto him, Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. It was meet that we should make merry and be glad, for this thy brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. See? And that's what was, this is the great beauty of the gospel, the good news. Evangelion. EU good, Angelion is message, a good message, a good gospel. That although those Israelites went off and went into those heathenistic ways, now there's a way for them to come back, so that the Lord can join Israel together. Because at the end of the day, the scriptures say that the Lord, when he made that promise to Abraham, he made it to all of his seed. Now, although all of the seed of Israel today is not going to be saved, the ones that don't make it on this side will come back to the ones that make it. Why? Because they are all a part of that promise. And this is why you have words in the New Testament as reconcile, reconciliation. Because they were gone, they were lost, and now they had to be reconciled back to the Father. Point blank, period. And they became strange. They became heathens. They became unrecognizable. And that's why even the Israelites that knew that they were Israelites called them heathens, uncircumcised, strangers, so on and so forth. And if you don't understand that history, you're not going to understand the New Testament. So going back here, prodigality. I think I got it this time. So it says, where they think it, matter of fact, you know what? Before I read on, let's go to, I got it. Let me read a couple more verses, then I'll jump down, then we'll hit some of those other points. All right? Who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead? Right? Those Israelite foreigners that talking shit about you, they're going to have to give account. For this cause, the gospel was a gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to the Most High in the Spirit. So they had to be, they still have to be told. And if they don't receive it, boy, they're going to, be out of there. Now, when we jump down to the 16th verse, matter of fact, you know what? Before I do that, let's go from there to 1 Peter, same book, 1 Peter. Let me get rid of that. 1 Peter 1. So you can start seeing the picture. As we read here, 1 Peter 1:1, Peter, an apostle of Yahushua, to the strangers which are scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. And in all these different areas, all of those revelries and all that was going on. Now, when we jump down to the 18th verse, right? I started at 17. And if you call on the Father, Yahweh, who without respect of persons judgeth according to every man's work, pass the time of your sojourning here in fear, in the truth, right? For as much as you know that you were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver or gold, from your vain conversation received by tradition from your fathers. And this is why you were known as Gentiles in the flesh. Because going all the way back to 200 some odd BC, all of your generations from that time to the time of when this was written, roughly around, say around 50 AD or so, give or take, you kept following that same tradition over and over again because you knew nothing else. You didn't know any better. And that was received from the vain conversation from your fathers. NLT, for you know that the Most High paid a ransom to save you from your empty life you inherited from your ancestors. And the ransom he paid was not mere gold or silver, right? It was the blood of Yahushua, as you read further down. With the precious blood of Yahushua, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot. Why? Because Yahushua is the Savior of the nation of Israel. So, if Yahushua never came on the scene, you Israelite foreigners would have never had a chance. Jake would have never had a chance, period. Even the ones that knew that they were Israelites. But especially those Israelite foreigners. So now you understand why it's called the good news. Or good tidings. Alright? So now, let's go from there, hit a couple of these other precepts. Let's go to Romans 1:21. It says, because that when they knew the Most High, meaning the Israelite foreigners, before they became Israelite foreigners, they glorified him not as the Most High. So when they were in their right mind, so to speak, they didn't glorify the Most High. They didn't give him glory. Neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations. By doing what? Worshiping idols. And their foolish heart was what? Darkened. From what? From their culture, from their heritage. They discontinue from their heritage. They discontinue from being an Israelite. They discontinue from their language. Period. And they discontinue, more importantly, from the graces of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. So let's go from there to Colossians 1:21. It says, and you that were sometimes alienated what? And enemies in your what? Mind by wicked works. What were those wicked works? Adultery, worshiping of idols, which is idolatry, and all of the other debaucherous things that Jake was doing. Yet, now hath he what? Reconciled. Let me see what it says in the NLT. This includes you who were once far away from the Most High. You were the enemies, separated from him by your evil thoughts and actions. So when we go to the word reconciled, and you're going to see this word quite a bit in the New Testament, applied to the Gentiles, which are the Israelite foreigners that are being brought back into the good graces of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Through Yahushai, back to the good graces of Yahweh by Yahushai. Apokatalasso, right? To reconcile completely, to reconcile back again, bring back a former state of harmony. The nations never had a former state of harmony with the Lord. He never chose them, he never gave them anything. Even when you go to Psalms, 147th chapter, 19th and 20th verse, this is what brought us near to the Lord. This is what made us holy. This is what made us separate. Psalms 147:19, he showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt with any nation, and as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. So how can they be reconciled or be brought back to a former state of harmony when they never had that in the first place? You see? Now, let's go from there to Ephesians 4. And 17. It says, this I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, or Israelite foreigners. In what? In the vanity of their mind. So their foolish heart became darkened, see? It's the same story told over and over again through all the different letters of the Apostle Paul, the Apostle Peter. Having what? The understanding darkened. What understanding? The understanding of being Israelites. Being under the good graces of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. being alienated from the life of the Most High through what? Through the ignorance that is in them. Why was the ignorance in them? Because they kept receiving that vain conversation from their fathers generation after generation after generation. Because of the blindness of their heart, because they that connection was severed. After a certain period of time, the first Jakes that embraced the Greek religion, Hellenism, they knew that they were Israelites, even though they didn't profess it. But after a certain period of time, the children that kept being born lost that. And they just, when they were born and grew up, all they knew was they were Greeks. They had Greek names, Latin names. They spoke the Greek language or Latin, mostly Greek. They taught their children the same thing. They ate the Greek diet. They followed the Greek gods. Who being past feeling of what? Of, you know, when you break the law, you feel like shit. So when they were doing certain things that were against the law, after a while, it didn't bother them because they lost that connection. Who being past feeling have given themselves over unto lasciviousness to work all uncleanness with greediness. And that's what's going on with these Israelite foreigners. Now let's go from there to Galatians 4 and 8. Howbeit then, when you knew not the Most High, meaning when you were already engulfed in that heathenistic mind state, you Israelite foreigners, ye did service unto them which by nature are no gods. See? That's why the Apostle Paul said, you know that you were Gentiles. But now after that you have known the Most High, or rather are known of the Most High, how turn you again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto you desire again to be in bondage? Right, you were in bondage under that heathenistic mind state. Now you want to be in bondage under the law? You in this thing because of grace. You were gone. You were worshiping other gods. And the Lord had mercy and bring you into this thing through the blood of Yahushua. So let's go from there to Zephaniah 1 and 8. It says, and it shall come to pass in that day, on the day of the Lord's sacrifice, that I will punish the princes and the king's children. Yeah, because these are the heads. Right? And all such as are clothed with what? Strange apparel. That's the different customs of the nations, their religious rites, their sacrifices, their worshiping of their idols. Those strange apparels, which made Jake what? Made Jake not recognizable to the Most High. That's why they were cast out. Let's go to the NLT on this one. On that day of judgment, says the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Shai, I will punish the leaders and the princes of Judah and all those following pagan customs. See? Now, let's go from there to Hosea. And Hosea is pretty much a book cursing out the northern kingdom. Hosea 5 and 7. They have dealt treacherously against the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Shai, for they have begotten strange children. See? Now shall a month devour them with their portion. NLT. They have betrayed the honor of the Lord, bearing children that are not his. Now their false religion will devour them along with their wealth. See? And that's what happened. Those false religions, those that work, the idol worship, that's what devoured Jake. That's why it says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And that's why these Israelite foreigners had no clue. They had no hope. They didn't have anything, to be able to connect back to the Father until Yahushua came on the scene to bring salvation to those Israelite foreigners. Let's go to Ezekiel 14 and 5. It says that I may take the house of Israel in their own heart, because they are all estranged from me through what? Their idols. That's what did us in, those idols. estranged. You have the word zawar, which is a word that is normally used for a heathen, but here it's used for an Israelite. Like I said, Nakar and Zawar and Thawashab was, I'll say Zakar and, I'm sorry, not Zakar, Nakar and Zawar, which are actually words to describe actual heathens, about 5% of the time in the Old Testament applies to the Israelites because Israel became strange or estranged. And you just have to know when to apply it. Now the word Thawashab could be interchangeable with the word Gar, depending on how it's used. See? It says to be strange, be a stranger, to become estranged. What does it mean to be estranged? Estranged relationship meaning. An estranged relationship is a state of severe emotional distance or total lack of communication between people who were once close. And that's what happened with the Heavenly Father and us. We became estranged because He pushed us away, and we lost that connection. And we lost the way to get that connection, such as family members or spouses. It involves a loss of affection, where individuals may no longer speak, have become hostile, or live completely separate lives. All right, so you became estranged. See? Ezekiel 14:5, that I may take the house of Israel in their own heart, because they are all estranged from me through their idols. So let's go from there to Jeremiah. Almost done. Chapter 19 and verse 12. Thus will I do unto this place, saith the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Shai. And do I have the right one? No, I don't. Did I write down the right scripture? Oh no, it's Jeremiah 9, not 19. Jeremiah 9 and 12. Who is the wise man that may understand this? And who is he to whom the mouth of the Lord hath spoken? That he may declare it, for what the land perisheth and is burned up like a wilderness, that none passeth through. So why is the land going to perish? NLT, so you can understand better. Who is wise enough to understand all this, who has been instructed by the Lord and can explain it to others? Why has the land been so ruined that no one dares to travel through it? This is why. But have walked, and the Lord said, because they have forsaken my law which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, neither walked therein, but have walked after the imagination of their own heart. And what happened? Their foolish heart was darkened, as we read in the New Testament. And after Balaam, which their fathers taught them. Going back to what? The vain conversation received from your fathers, going back to 1 Peter 1:18. Now, let's go from there. Got a couple more. Amos, chapter 2 and 4. Thus saith the Lord power, for 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have despised the law of the Lord, and have not kept his commandments, and their lies caused them to what? Commit errors, after the which their fathers have walked. Going once again to the vain conversation received from their fathers. Ezekiel chapter 20. and 18. But I said unto their children in their wilderness, walk ye not in the statute of your fathers, neither observe their judgment, nor defile yourself with their idols. See? Vain conversation received from their fathers. It's a generational thing, generation after generation. In this case, they knew they were Israelites, but when you get to the New Testament, a lot of them lost that. That's why the last scripture I'm going to leave you with, Jeremiah 16:19, which is still broken down wrong, This is talking about Israelites. Jeremiah 16:19. O Lord, my strength and my fortress, and my refuge in the day of affliction, the Gentiles or the Israelite foreigners shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth. See, we even over here to the other side of the world. And shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things where therein is no pleasure. Wherein there is no pleasure. And that's exactly what happened. You know, that vain conversation received from our fathers. And that's what led us to this situation, to this very day. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. You know, pray that all goes well for all the brothers and few sisters out there that are going to keep the Passover tonight. I believe some brothers are probably keeping it already over on the other side of the world, you know, depending on what time it is. When the sun goes down, you know, that's when the celebration starts. So Lord's will, you know, have a beautiful, you know, Yapa Pesach. And in Lord's will, you've been edified by this lesson. And to the next time I say, Shalom.